the addict needs the drug like they need water. And that's why it baffles the criminal justice community and family members and all, in general, when we see addicts do desperate things to acquire the drug that their brain is telling them they need it. And oftentimes the veterans I work with will talk about how, well, they were taught something, you don't surrender. Right?
Yeah.
Well, this is a different war, and this is a different kind of surrender. This is a principle that's absolute. If you don't surrender to this fact of your life, this is going to happen. He sums up in 6 words: trust God, clean house, help others. Freedom is not the right to do what you want to do.
Right.
It's the ability to do what you ought.
I am joined again by Mike Kuklica, who is one of our intensive outpatient therapists at Life and Purpose Behavioral Health. And so we are going to revisit addiction. We're going to keep going down this road and talk about a lot of different things related to addiction. We certainly do not ever cover as much as we can because there's so much to talk about. Hope you guys enjoy. Take a listen. Everything I keep coming back to is how do we get more people to be willing to engage in treatment? And one of the things that pops into my mind is the drug has such a hold on that person.
Right.
It's really hard to get that hold, that grip to loosen and let go so that person can kind of break free. What it does to our brain and what it does to our body, what it does to kind of our mind and the way we think.
I agree with you that all of that is true. I think it's also what the drug is doing for the person using it. An escape from pain, a remedy. There's a multitude of reasons as to why people use.
Right.
But it does also come down to the euphoria, the effect that the drug produces for them.
Yeah. So when you say euphoria, can you describe that a little bit, or what that kind of looks like for somebody that's struggling with that? What is that euphoria?
It's in relationship to the release of dopamine in the brain and other feel-good neurotransmitters that get released in the brain, and it gives a sense of well-being, of pleasure, a high. Euphoria is another word for the high that the addict or the alcoholic gets from the chemical.
Something that's very rewarding.
Absolutely.
To them.
And acts upon that reward system.
When I hear people kind of question why somebody would use, and you'd be like, well, you clearly haven't used, right? Because there's this like reward that happens. People are not using drugs because it feels bad.
Right.
At least in the beginning.
Right.
I mean, I know there's times where and most of the time it's the feeling bad part has a lot to do when they're not on the drug.
That's right.
But when they're having the drug, they're feeling fairly good in terms of physiological, neurologically.
Right.
That dopamine's released, and I would even say that it's not a small release of dopamine.
Oh, it's
a pretty large. It's a pretty large.
That's right.
Release.
What kind of distinguishes the addict from the drug abuser? They all get that euphoria and that effect from the drug. However, the addict gets to a place where they feel a sense of normalcy when they have it. The brain chemistry, whether it's already set up for the addiction or whether it has been changed, the brain chemistry has been changed by prolonged use. Their hedonic set point in their brain gets to that place where they don't feel normal unless they have it.
Sure.
So it becomes, for the addict, it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of, the addict needs the drug like they need water. And that's why it baffles the criminal justice community and family members and all, in general, when we see addicts do desperate things to acquire the drug that their brain is telling them they need it.
Right.
And there is a physiology to it, especially with alcohol and benzos and the opiates. Once cessation of use happens and there is a physiological dependence on the drug, they will experience withdrawal symptoms that can be pretty severe and in some cases life-threatening. So it does become a very desperate situation for the person using.
Because in the beginning, they can't get to that euphoric experience any other way.
When they first start using, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like if they stop using and they get such a, and maybe they stop using because they're dealing with emotional traumas or whatever, and they don't like the way they feel when they're without the drug.
Right. I do believe in miraculous healing. I believe it happens. And I know that there are exceptions. That has happened for some individuals. However, more often we have to help people. They're going to feel a lack for a while. There's going to be some suffering involved.
Sure.
And, teaching people how to deal with that suffering and get the support they need to walk them through that until they come to a place where their brain has healed from it. So it takes time.
Right. So healing involves some suffering. Like you can't get to healing without some elements of pain.
Absolutely.
To get through it. And so that avoidance of treatment is that I don't want to feel pain. Like I don't want to talk about it because it's too painful and stuff like that.
So you've noticed that in the mental health.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to talk about this event that basically filters my whole life.
Right.
Like I see the whole world through these events or one event, but I don't want to deal with it because it's too painful.
Right.
You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to deal with it, but you're dealing with it every day. Like you're being reminded of these painful events every day. So you're dealing with it anyways, whether you want to talk to me about it or not. Now I get it. I get it. Like I certainly don't want to do something that is going to overwhelm me, right? Like it's going to, if I start talking about it, it's going to create way more pain than I'm already experiencing. It's going to get out of control.
That's right.
So and same thing probably with addiction. You have to have them learn that the environment that they're about to engage in treatment in is such that we're going to stretch you a little bit, but we're not going to overwhelm you. It's not going to get completely out of control. We have these things in place to provide a safe space for you to face those things. Absolutely.
Building a trusting counseling therapeutic relationship is huge. The environment in the group setting, creating a safe place, whether it's for an individual session or a group section, is absolutely, the drug world, living on the streets and living that lifestyle, addicts will mostly tell you, yes, there is a such thing as good and evil. They've seen evil up close. As far as the finding an environment that they can feel safe in and learn to trust in a therapist or a sponsor or some other human being that they can, learn to bring some of these things out into the light, finally. That's hugely healing.
Sure.
Yeah. So it is absolutely essential. If they think people are there for the wrong motives, if they think that, and addicts tend to be very perceptive people, right? When you live that way in that survival mode, see and experience some of the things that drug addicts see and experience, evil exists. And you do know that you see the bad side of humanity a lot, and even family dynamics even, so you learn not to trust people. Okay. Sure. So coming into therapy, they're going to respond to people being real with them and compassionate and having a free forum environment that's non-condemning.
Sure.
And all of that. That's absolutely essential to helping an addict build that trust. You have to build trust with them.
They're not going to recover in an environment of shame. Like you're a bad person and you need to be
right.
Turned into something different. You're also not going to be cover in an environment of coercion. Coercion might get you into the
That's
door, but coercion by itself is not going to. If you spent all your sessions going, if you don't participate, I'm telling your probation officer, and you're going to go back to jail, that's not going to make, okay.
No.
So coercion might get them to the door, but you can't thrive in that environment where it's all coercion. Like it has to be, the therapeutic environment has to not be an environment of coercion.
And do you know why? It's because their inherent individual human dignity is not being respected, and they know it.
Right.
If everybody's trying to get them to do what they think they're supposed to be doing, change is not an external method. It's the recovery's an internal job, and it goes out from there. And the external might bring them in, and that's all right. The coercion might come, bring them to the table. It could be physical problems, but eventually it's the real change process is an internal thing, and it's also a decision that they eventually have to make for themselves. And I like when you talk about the hold that the drugs have. I like how you describe that. What I've seen, once they achieve physical abstinence for a period of time, then their capacity to be able to make a decision for themselves is greater.
They're more regulated.
Right.
And so they can have more access to the brains that can make good decisions, to parts of the brain.
That's right. And so, the drugs are out of their system.
Right.
And now, sobriety, I do believe sobriety is another word for freedom. Freedom is not the right to do what you want to do.
Right.
It's the ability to do what you ought. We have a deconstructed definition of freedom in our society where it's just live for yourself, live selfishly, live in excess. That often leads to the opposite of freedom. It's destructive.
It's similar to that, like that advocacy of, it's free speech. No, free speech doesn't mean you have the right to just treat people horribly. Like you have, or without consequence. Yeah, I like the freedom to live how you ought to be.
Right.
You should always have that opportunity to live that way.
Right. And the classic, a great definition is what happens with addiction. I mean, I still believe a person can become an addict if they're not set up chemically.
Sure.
I believe I was an addict before I first used.
Well, and I think that goes back to kind of be careful to not oversimplify. There's many factors.
Oh, yes.
That go into it. So you could be, there's a term in the science world called epigenetics, which is epi is above, genetics, so it's the idea that experiences can impact our genetic predispositions. It can turn certain genetic codes on and off. So if you're predisposed to, you have the genetics to be a world-class baseball player, but you're never given
the opportunity.
You're never given a glove and a ball and a bat.
That's right.
You'll never be able to live out that predisposition. Same thing on the reverse side. If you're genetically, because it's in your genetics, generation after generation of addiction, if you're given the right experiences, environment, opportunities, skills, relational rewards, all these different types of things, then that can shut off those types of things. We have like networks in our brain, the reward networks and regulatory networks and relational networks, and they're interweaved. They all influence each other and connect to each other. And so we have these cups that need to be filled with reward, not necessarily good or bad, but reward, things that make us feel better. Most powerful reward typically is relationships. So if we have really strong relational health, our reward cups get filled up pretty good. But then other things like music and movement and exercise and our belief systems, being able to live out things that we believe in, all of those things kind of filled our cup. Well, if we have really poor relational health. We have nobody in our life and we're alone and we don't have a whole lot of good coping skills or things to do. Then those cups don't get filled.
Right.
Well, guess what fills that cup up pretty quickly? A drug.
Oh,
right.
It's immediate. It's immediate.
So if you take away that reward and don't have that relational health or these other things that are going to be healthier,
yes,
you know, you're not going to be able to overtake the drug.
Right.
And so in all of these things, if you don't have a rewarding relational experience in treatment, whether it's AA or NA, whether it's IOP, whether it's, you know, they need that. And so that, and I think the rewarding experience, at least at the time of addiction, when they're trying to recover, how can you help them feel comfortable with who they are without the drug in that environment? Like, because you're saying they used to feel normal. Yes. So how do you get them to be able to sit with themselves?
Beautiful image in the big book. It talks about a ship that has wrecked. Everyone's on the island or on the land and they're all working together, and there's this sense of camaraderie. They've been through this perilous event together, and the survival drive to live is also there. And so people that are in recovery together, if they can establish that, you know, and it's huge. You know, right. you look at, you know, after 9/11 happened, for a short period of time, there was a lot of unity in our country. You know, and
right, yeah.
people working together and
rally together
help
for a common
and everything,
goal,
and
for healing.
Yeah,
I'm
sure there were political agendas and all that. Aside from that, the citizens, the people of this country, were united for a short period of time. And so when we look at how tragic addiction is, addicts speak the same language. They know this is life or death, and they're able to congregate together at a common goal.
Yeah.
Then that helps. It's beautiful. The friendships made are often very deep,
sure.
and and so, but they're living by different principles now than the code of the streets.
There's a his name is Scott Larson, and he worked with people in prisons, and he talks about how, like and this is, I think, is a very similar process where you know, where you're working with people in gang, trying to split gangs up is very ineffective, because there's this bond, and whether it's bonded through a positive force or a negative force, doesn't matter. They're bonded.
Right.
And so when you try to split that bond up, it actually draws them stronger together. And I used to remember that in residential, where we'd work with kids that were, you know, getting along, but you know, the idea was not to split these kids that, even though they were getting along well in a negative way, like they were causing a lot of disruption and they were tag teaming to kind of be challenging. The idea was not to isolate them from each other. The idea was to connect with their connection, and that's the same thing. It's not that the gangs inherently, from a kind of relational perspective, is necessarily always bad. There's some positive traits to that. It's that as they get together, they engage in behavior that is hurtful to others, right?
It's fulfilling a genuine need.
Right.
In them.
Right. They don't have that relational connection. They find it in the gangs. Now, granted, the way they come into that, I mean, there's a lot of complicated issues, but if you can connect with the gang and engage them in things that are more pro-social. So engaging in healthier entrepreneurships than drug dealing, being able to do more pro-social things.
Yes.
There's actually been greater success in being able to intervene in that way. And so I think that's very similar. You would never want to, you know, like we used to tell people, okay, when you go home, you can't hang out with the people you hung out with. Right. Well, they don't have anybody else. And I'd have kids say to me, what do you want me to do? Hang out with the honor roll kid? Like, I'm in residential. Like, they're not going to hang out with me. You know, what else? Who else do I have to? And so I'm like, yeah, that's a really good point.
Right. And it often takes time to build those new social connections as well. So that's
Yeah. So it's like, how do you
dealing with,
those statements don't necessarily get what you think you're going to get from it.
Right.
But I go back to, can they have an experience that they find valuable, rewarding, positive, even through suffering, right?
Yes.
So coming out of something together, overcoming a really difficult challenge.
That's right.
I mean, there's, because when we get stressed, oxytocin gets released, our bonding chemicals, and so draws us closer. So there's actually neurological science behind the idea that we face something challenging together. And
it's amazing how the more that we learn about addiction and the brain chemistry and everything, how, the Eastern kind of idea of medicine that's holistic, everything's connected, everything's integrated. There's the physical, the mental, the emotional, the occupational, social, spiritual. We can't really afford to leave any of those parts out, because they're, a human being is mind, body, soul, and all these different dimensions of a human. We need to, make sure that we're, because addiction is a complex disease that affects a person in all those areas, so, keeping that perspective is important as well, and not leaving anything out. You mentioned these principles, and you're talking about the 12 steps a lot of time, right? And so these 12 steps are very grounding and very foundational. Yes. Right. But I would imagine that philosophically by themselves, they're not as powerful until you really live those principles, right? Okay. That's a good way to. I'm challenged. That's a great segue into that. Okay. Yeah. That's how I want to begin with this is, okay, so the chemicals are instant effect, right? Yeah. For the addict, or anyone using or drinking. And these principles, as they are applied, you see results often later on, and they're more lasting results than the chemicals. It's not a smooth road, though. It's not a smooth. By no means. You're not going, oh, I'm doing one, and it just comes so easily. And by no means. You're trying something. You're dosing. Step one, and then it's okay. It kind of you come up against a challenge or a wall or a struggle, and you have to kind of work through all those. That's right. I would imagine together. I want to speak on the 12 steps as a therapy model. Okay. Sure. And so they are 12 steps of therapy. We could say that they are also principles. And so step one, as you alluded to, honestly, that's where the person comes to that proverbial end of themselves. Right. Okay. And I'm defeated. Okay. And oftentimes the veterans I work with will talk about how, they were taught something completely opposite in the military. They were trained, you don't surrender. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, this is a different war, and this is a different kind of surrender. And so this is a principle that's absolute. If you don't surrender to this fact of your life, this is going to happen. Okay. If you do surrender to this fact, you're opening the door to getting well. And like agricultural laws, like laws of physics, like the more you fight, the more these are recovery laws, so to speak. And honestly, if a person fights that and does not surrender to that fact, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. The addiction is going to progress. Okay. Let me see if this analogy or meta, I always mix those two definitions up. Okay. But so let's just take my oldest daughter. It's nighttime. She's in bed. She's rolling around. She can't get to sleep. She's, uncomfortable. She's
flailing around. Mom, Dad, I can't get to sleep, blah, 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 blah. Right. And I would always say, the more you fight sleep, the harder it is to get to sleep.
Okay.
You know, and so until you can just kind of stop fighting and just allow yourself to fall asleep when your body's ready, you'll fall asleep quicker because we know she's tired.
Right.
You know, but for some reason she's dysregulated for whatever. And so that's kind of my mindset of how I try to help her in sleeping. Is like, you can't fall asleep by flipping around in your bed.
Okay.
You know, and I would almost imagine, like, when I'm fighting this war on addiction, the more I fight the drug, the more it grabs a hold of me and doesn't let go.
That's right.
Right.
That is an absolute.
Right.
There's no getting around it. And the paradox of it is, when a person surrenders to that fact, now I can teach them, or they can learn how to fight the fight in a different way that's more effective. Mm-hmm. And so that opens the doorway to the rest of the therapy. Mm-hmm. But the step one it can't be skipped.
Right.
It is an absolute. Mm-hmm. And just like the other steps are.
Now, does step one, allowing yourself to feel, like, part of the surrendering has to be, I'm
sure there's an emotional aspect. There's an emotional aspect to it.
That's what makes it hard. Like, if I could just cognitively say, I surrender, I'm good.
Right.
Then things would be a lot easier, but it's not. You have to surrender and experience this pain and
absolutely
discomfort.
It is not just an intellectual capitulation. There's
a body component to it.
This is a complete surrender. I am defeated here.
Yeah.
This thing's got me beat, and this is it. That opens the doorway to, I need a power greater than me. Everything I've tried, all of my ingenuity, all of my devices, everything that I've tried has not worked. That's a good place for an addict to be.
Right.
Because now there's hope.
Sure.
Now they're admitting to themselves, the core of their being, I'm an addict, and I can't save myself from this by myself.
Right. You get past the denial.
Oh, yeah, that's the
right.
Step one.
Right.
Yeah. We live in a time where, there's a philosophical framework called relativism, and it is pervasive. Mm-hmm. You decide your own truth. And it's a very I've put a lot of research into this. It's a very destructive philosophy, and a lot of us don't even know how much that philosophy affects us. And for someone struggling with addiction, they need something that's solid to build their lives on, because when you live that chaotic lifestyle for so long, and you see the results of that, when you're told that you define reality, that's a dangerous thing. Is there objective truth? Is there truth greater than everybody? I've come to the belief that there is. There is a higher truth that's bigger than everybody, and that's not just a subjective thing. This is something that's like, how do you find higher meaning in your life if there isn't higher truth? So I would argue that relativism leads to a lack of meaning. It's empty. It leads to nihilism, and that does not help an addict. So in real time, if I'm working from a relativistic framework with addicts, it won't be long before they're back to using again, because it's like, what's the use?
What
There's
would that
no
look
ultimate
like?
meaning.
The relativistic framework, what would that look like?
Relativistic framework means there's no moral truth. There's no, you decide. Right. It's you be your own God, basically, and you just live for you and your own desires and whims and your ego.
Right.
And
just whatever the wind blows is kind of.
Well, kind of, but it's all about self. Mm-hmm. That's what it comes down to. And
right.
When we bring in the spiritual and the moral into therapy, which the 12 steps do, people respond to that. Now they know what to do with their guilt. Now they know what to do. Like, not, I understand where you're coming from with shame. I'm speaking more of guilt, the harm that the person has done to other people and themselves.
Right.
You get sober. What do you do with that?
Right. And, there's not one or the other. There's both.
There's a framework. If there's a conscience, then there's, like I said, the addict has seen evil up close and personal. Okay. That's lived on the streets. There is a such thing as if there's guilt, then there's a conscience.
I always say that it's good that you have guilt, because I would be more worried if you don't.
And so if that's the case, then, okay, a relativist could say, well, my neighbor has 2 televisions and I don't have any. And a relativist can justify, well, when my neighbor's gone, that's not fair. I'm going to go and steal their television. Well, you know what? There's a higher truth. Stealing is wrong, right? And so the addict who has gone around, stealing things from family or whatever to supply their habit, they hopefully have some, once they get sober, hopefully they have some guilt for that and they want to make it right. And so that's where these moral absolutes do come in. And I don't want to talk anybody out of guilt. I want to help them. I want to help them.
You want to encourage it, like not to be.
Let's resolve this so you can heal from this and live for something higher than you now, not just for you.
I'm also hearing an element of comparing yourself to others rather than reflecting on how you operate in the confines of your moral or spiritual self. Like, so if I say, well, it's okay for me to do this because so-and-so over here is doing that, living life without spiritual or moral kind of foundations allows you to be susceptible to the things we see in the world overtaking us.
Well, yes.
So if I say, okay, if I'm not grounded in this philosophy of thou shalt not kill, and I see all this killing in the world, and say, well, no one else cares about it, so why should I? Or, and that's a very, extreme example, and maybe it probably happens slower. I can start changing my belief system a little bit because I'm susceptible to the experiences around me, and I'm comparing myself through how other people operate.
And when I speak about moral absolutes, I'm not making a case for self-righteousness and condemnation and things like that.
But that involves comparing yourself too.
Okay.
Like, I'm better than you because now if I get into that place where I am so moralistic that I condemn everybody else.
Now people may interpret it that way.
Right.
Like, if someone is trying to live differently than the consensus around them, then sometimes, that doesn't go over too well,
right.
But I can think of in history, people that were moral absolutists. Abe Lincoln was a moral absolutist. Martin Luther King Jr. was a moral absolutist. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who opposed the Nazis, he was a moral absolutist. The people who opposed the communists in their country for righteous reasons, they were moral absolutists. Gandhi was a moral absolutist. Teresa of Calcutta was a moral absolutist. And so they lived for something higher. Now, did they get pushed back? Absolutely.
Right.
Did they get falsely accused of things? Absolutely. But they live for something higher, and I think they provide good examples. We need people who live heroic virtue, instead of, our culture looks to Hollywood celebrities and everything like that, and oftentimes they're not providing very good examples, and when I look at people that are willing to give their lives, for, I know there's a man named Saint Maximilian Kolbe. He's called the Saint of Auschwitz. He was a Catholic priest in Poland who, this married Jewish man and family, they were going to execute this Jewish man. And this Catholic priest substituted his life for this Jewish man who's a stranger.
Right. Because
this man had a family, he willingly died in that man's place. How do you make a decision like that if you're a relativist? If nothing matters? He was a moral absolutist. He gave his life willingly for another person he didn't even know. That is an act of self-sacrifice that runs completely countercultural to the world we live in today. That philosophy of do your own thing, that philosophy of you do you, it's all relative, which produces the narcissistic culture we're living in. I contend the 12 steps contain a roadmap to resolving that self-centeredness. Everybody's got the problem. It's not just addicts.
Right.
It's addicts aren't the only ones with problems, or we're not the only ones that have the self-centeredness issue. It's a pervasive thing.
Well, and I think I would push back a little bit in terms of how extreme we get in either direction. So if you get extremely self-centered, where you only think about yourself and care about yourself, or you are so giving that you neglect yourself. Okay. Like that there has to be kind of some flexibility in being able to I got to figure out a way to take care of myself.
Great point.
In order to be able to live the life that I want to live. Yes. Of being selfless or whatever, it's kind of like when we get to the absolutes, the black or white, that there has to be kind of, flexibility, or because the danger also in that is if I am this really giving and helpful person, and I think this happens with people in my field, our field, therapists, that I give and give. I see this with parents, or especially foster parents. I feed these kids, I give them clothes, I love them, and what do? They go and do this. And it's kind of like when we give ourselves in this helping way and we don't necessarily get the outcome that we're expecting, then we get really, troubled by it, right? Like disgruntled or discouraged by that. And so I think it's having some flexibility and understanding.
That's right.
You're doing things because that's what's going to be best for the world and for you and for others, is to be helpful, not based on, it's the process that you live by, not the outcomes that you're expecting.
Rosa Parks said no on the bus, right? I think, sometimes situations call for us to put our foot down and to speak up. There are times when saying no is the most kindest thing you can do for somebody. Well, or be loving enough. I'm thankful for the people that cared enough about me to speak the truth to me, even though I didn't want to hear it or like to hear it.
But I also even think on the flip side, as somebody in recovery, we're probably asking them to do things that might not work necessarily in terms of how they impact others. So at some point in their recovery plan that maybe they've, worked through a lot of things and they're ready to get employment. And we might say, wear a suit, brush up on your interview skills, and you go apply for these jobs, and then they don't get it and they don't get the jobs. And then you can kind of go, I'm doing everything right and no one cares. I'm just an addict. I'm just, you can kind of get discouraged and fall back. So if you don't have those, I would say if you don't have those principles, like process over product. And then also an element of we're asking people to be patient, because you're not going to get a quick resolve to the struggle.
That's absolutely right. And when the brain has been trained with chemicals to expect immediate results, right? As a person applies these principles to one's life, you see immediate results to an extent, but it's more of a, like you say, a process. But it's a process that produces ultimately real happiness. You know, the going back to the euphoria over and over and over again actually leads to misery.
Well, and I would contend that that's such a, at least in the beginning of treatment, you know, the neural network that is shaped by your use is so strong of a network. It's so myelinated from the repetitive use and, you know, engagement. You're going to have this really rewarding experience coming to IOP group and connect and seeing this hope and connection and everything like that. But it's not a very well ingrained network.
It needs to translate outside of IOP.
Right. And you need more of that. You need more of that activation of that network to compete.
That's right.
With this huge myelin. When I say myelinated, it's just like that coding you have in like audio, you know, like these cords right here, you know, the better insulated everything is, the stronger those signals go. We have a pretty quick, you know, that immediacy of, as soon as I experience this particular dysregulation, I go right to the drug. Like that network is like, boom, you go right there, because that's how strong it is. Right. And so now we're asking people to go to a different place that's not as strong. 90 meetings in 90 days. There's probably there's some neurological benefit to that. Of I'm giving myself many of these doses so that I can compete with this really strong network that says whenever you feel discomfort, use.
That's right. It's going against the grain. You know, swimming up current. You know, I use those images with the people I work with to kind of help coach them along the process. We look at these absolute principles to live by, but I guess maybe the irony is that they produce more and more freedom. There's freedom within the framework. You know, the person does not lose their individuality. In fact, their individuality is enhanced. They really truly, you know, if they apply these steps to their life genuinely and sincerely, they recognize their inherent dignity themselves eventually, and they come to discover an inkling of their worth, and they begin to, you know, find a healthy love for themselves. And Dr. Bob summed up the 12 steps in 6 words. You know, for all the complexity of addiction, the solution provided in the 12 steps therapeutic model, he sums up in 6 words: trust God, clean house, help others. Beautiful. The solution's simple. We human beings often complicate things, you know, but as those are applied, these absolutes, and if we work them sincerely, and in my experience, they produce greater freedom, you know, and for, you know, if someone looks at it and they think, oh, this is so rigid, it's not flexible or anything, the amazing thing is that there is flexibility. It's freedom producing.
Well, the flexibility has to be there, or if you violated the 12 steps, then you wouldn't be allowed back in, right? Like, you know, like you have to have some flexibility with it to be able to continue to live by it.
Getting sober is a messy process. Yeah, you know, I haven't perfected the 12 steps. Right. in my own life, which is
probably a good thing.
But you know, that doesn't mean that I'm not seeking that. And,
but
you know,
if it was that easy, right? I would contend that it's probably good that that you haven't mastered it, because then that means you're still working at it.
That's right, and that's how it's intended. Right. It's meant to be a lifelong journey, of growth.
Well, and I also look at any type of treatment or and change that you want to make in your life is you have to get out of autopilot. You got to turn off the autopilot switch, and you have to consciously engage in getting better. Yes. And so there's that element of we spend so much of our day in autopilot, and there's some, purpose for that, but there has to be components during the day where you go, is my autopilot on the right course? Like, is it doing what it's like? I just kind of clipped a mountain. I need to kind of restabilize the plane. So I got to turn it off of autopilot because it didn't go down the course that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be moments where you do those things, like you reflect, or you, at least, the younger we are, probably we're less reflecting, but trying to learn from our elders, and that helps us live not in autopilot. There's elements of group. There's several that are on autopilot. They haven't been able to turn off that switch and engage. And then there's some that are really actively like, okay, I'm trying to kind of, apply these things. And
it's often a messy process getting sober.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that. And as those principles of therapy are applied, they go from black and white to living color eventually, and that's where the freedom comes.
It kind of clears.
And it's an inner freedom. It's not this freedom to do whatever I want and live selfishly. It's a freedom to be able to fulfill my responsibilities and my station in life. It's a freedom to have some real peace that doesn't rely upon a chemical. It's the freedom to face fears, embrace reality, and try to find a higher purpose for my life and meaning. And that's what ultimately helps someone to experience real happiness rather than going to that chemical or whatever the distraction or drug is,
Yeah. Well, and I go back to, I go back to the start of our conversation, coming full circle, is that we have to create new neurological rewards for our brain. Because right now, going to alcohol and drugs as a reward, now some people do it and don't have major problems. We have to have relational reward. We have to have, people have to engage in some type of purpose or belief. There's an existential element to this crisis of who am I, why am I here, what value do I have,
right?
And that can be reward. When I find value in me, then that becomes rewarding for me. So then if I can continue to live in ways that gives me that value, I get that dopamine release. Elements of engaging in treatment, especially in that kind of group concept, can provide a lot of that relational, that reward that allows you to kind of have that freedom.
Yes. And then eventually coming to a place where the individual is contributing something good to the community, to the greater good.
Yeah.
That is rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
This is why I think there's a huge peer recovery movement. I don't think it's because, peers are just better at kind of helping others. No, I think they find value in helping others. I think that's a huge piece to that. And so, man, I love talking to you because it's just, I don't know. It's just fun. I enjoy it. So thank you for coming on again.
It feels like we're just getting started.
I know.
When we end up. So
we were talking. We'll make it a series. We'll just keep coming back back because I think and I hope that people will enjoy it as much as I am enjoing it. So
I thank you for the opportunity, Doug.
No problem.